Architectural and Design Commission to order. Commissioner Wiley, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. It's all right. Face the flag and put your hands over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioners Catherine Carlson. Present. Amanda Haas. Absent. Andrew Mercy.
Present.
Timothy Wiley.
Present.
Vice Chairman Russell Bartholet.
Present.
Chairperson April Bartlett.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Public business from the floor. If an individual is unable to stay through the entire meeting due to extenuating circumstances, a total of 10 minutes is provided at this time, during which input may be given regarding agenda items. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Any person who would like to address the Architectural and Design Commission on any agendized item is requested to complete a speaker card for the recording secretary and identify the agenda item you would like to discuss. Each person will be given an opportunity to address the Architectural and Design Commission at the time such item is discussed by the Architectural and Design Commission. Speaker cards available at the entrance of the council chambers. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Has everyone reviewed the minutes from the previous meeting?
Move adoption of the consent calendar.
A second? All in favor?
Second.
Show of hands, everybody.
Motion passes 5-0.
We have continued business, so we're going to discuss the draft residential zones update and proposed transit-oriented development overlay zone. Is that going to be you, Brian?
No, I'm actually going to let Mr. Ng do that.
Oh, great.
Thanks.
I think we had talked, well, good evening, commissioners. This was discussed at the last meeting as well, but I'll update you guys on what has occurred since then. We took this to the Planning Commission on January 28th, so just a couple weeks ago. And the Planning Commission did adopt the residential zones for approval for the City Council's review. Again, this is the section in the municipal code that covers residential development. And real briefly, I'll go over the main features again. Also, you should have received an email from Joy about 4 weeks ago that provided a link to the draft residential zones. Again, the main features, we have some changes to the development standards, including we're asking for recessed garages, porches, and other architectural facade features as identified in the design guidelines that the ADC got to work on a few years ago. So a lot of this effort is it is largely a reflection of what was done in the design guidelines, except now it's reflected in our standards. So in addition to that, we have added design and performance measures to provide increased opportunities for flexibility in site design, and this can be achieved through a residential plan development. The other main feature, solar energy systems for new homes. This is something that we're going to ask for our builders to provide for new homes. There are also incentives drafted into the code for infill development. We really want to push builders to build on the vacant properties within what we consider our more urbanized area, as opposed to the continual leapfrogging development on the outskirts of town. We feel that this is really important because it really is a strain on the city's infrastructure and resources. So we're trying to provide some incentives to allow builders to build closer to the core of the city. And one of those incentives is added density. We will allow them to build more beyond what is typically allowed for an R7000 zone, which is typically 4 units per acre. If someone chooses to develop within what we consider our infill areas, we will allow them to go up to 8 units per acre. Also, add a feature for the residential zones, the provisions on accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units, as inferred by the name, it's another living space on the property that's accessory to the primary structure. This allows people to build a structure in their backyard should the amount of area would permit for it. It's limited to 10% of the lot size, so say if you have an 8,000 square foot lot, you could choose to build an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit that could be used to house your grandmother, your 20-something-year-old son that you don't want living under the same roof with you. You get the idea, because the response that we're getting is that from the public is that there's more and more desire to have. We're seeing more multi-generational households, and this would accommodate for those type of household arrangements. Also in the draft code, there's a live-work ordinance. The live-work ordinance allows for units that incorporate both living and workspace. This is only applicable to structures that front onto primary arterial streets, so Avenue L. What this allows them to do is essentially operate a business out of the home. For example, there's an example on Avenue L. There's a chiropractor's office. The chiropractor lives there, but she also can use the unit for her business. And it's more of a transitional use where, say along primary arterial street, it's not the ideal location for just a residence, but when there are some opportunities to allow for commercial uses, this ordinance allows for that type of transition. That, in a nutshell, is some of the main features. Again, we anticipate taking this before the City Council on their second meeting in February. And, we hope that, they will approve it with the recommendations that we've provided. And this concludes my presentation, and I'm open to questions.
Allowing 8 units, will that, added stress to the, when you have people living in close proximity, sometimes it changes, but has there been a thought of that, the dynamics of that, and as such to, kind of give you the living space, but then also I'm not too close to my neighbor's space,
Sure, I think it comes down to design.
Okay.
8 units per acre, it can either look like some multifamily structure, or, it's really intended to be still a single-family type use. Yes, you're probably going to get smaller lots, but it depends on the arrangement of the house on the lot and, and its proximity to the other structure. Sometimes you can build in a way where windows don't look directly into each other.
Okay.
It's things like that.
Okay.
It all comes down to design, and you can have a really good design for 6 or 8 units per acre, and sometimes you can't even tell the difference between something that's 4 units an acre or 8 units an acre just by looking at the elevations from the street.
Okay.
If you, a lot of times our R7000 lots, they're about 60 foot wide, 60 to 70 feet wide, but they're also pretty deep. So it may be the case that you have a lot that's still the same width, but it's now just a little bit more shallow. So from the street, you still can't tell what the difference is. it really comes down to site design
Okay.
and architecture.
All right, good. Thank you.
Are there other places in Lancaster where there is a community set up this way where it's been successful or unsuccessful?
Not quite. Not that I can. Can you think of any, Brian?
No, unfortunately, we don't really have any great examples. I think because so much of the housing here has been driven, I mean, it's been of two basic types. It was either pretty conventional single-family detached, or it was an apartment. You know, we don't even have that middle ground, so to speak, of that kind of moderate density unit approach. But I can give you some examples of where we've had people talk to us and wondered why other sorts of things that they would love to have options on aren't available. For an example, I've talked with a number of realtors and people, and they would love to have options that are kind of like the College Terrace condominium projects, but even though those things are probably 35 years old, when one goes vacant, it's like snapped up right away. And, you know, I hear from people who say, how come we don't have more options like that? You know, people who, in many cases, have lived in this community for a long time would still like to live here, but they don't want to live in their, you know, 10,000 square foot lot, you know, 2,000 square foot house. They want, you know, a smaller area that they can live, but they don't see the market providing that in any way. And so what we're hoping is that we're going to offer more options to the development community, and hopefully, you know, that will ultimately result in more choices that people have, because, you know, I think only having the option of an apartment versus a single-family detached house probably isn't a great thing that's conducive to, you know, the long-term growth or viability of your community. It's great that people have those options, but we're looking for some additional ways that can be achieved. And in some cases, our infill sites, I think, are perfect candidates for that. You know, they have infrastructure already nearby. They may already be very proximate to commercial and other services, and, you know, they'd be great for people who maybe want that sort of approach. So, but yeah, I'm afraid I don't have any great examples for you here. I can probably take you to other communities and show you great examples, but I can't show them to you here.
No, that's fine. That's great.
I have a question for Chen. What size lots are you going to be requiring to have multiple dwellings?
To have multiple dwellings,
Like you were saying, adding a guest house in the back
minimum 7,000 square feet.
on a 7,000 square foot lot?
Yes, you still have to meet all of your typical setback requirements. So, you know, we're still asking for 15 feet from the back property line, 5 from the side. So, you know, you still have to maintain this distance with the properties next to you. So it's if you have the ability and the room to do it. But we're finding that even on 7,000 square foot lots, you know, with a 2,000 square foot home, a lot of people, well, some people still have the ability to put a small cottage in the back, and we're allowing people the flexibility to do that.
Wow.
There are some caveats if you read the ordinance, you know, that there are some concerns about people turning this into a rental type situation. Those that apply to build for an accessory dwelling unit, they do have to record a covenant that the owner remains on the property.
So realistically, if the owner lived in the front house, then they could rent out the back house.
They could, but the owner would be on site to make sure that it's maintained and
Be responsible for.
right.
For the homes that are on the major streets to operate a business out of there, is that concern referencing the advertisement of the businesses?
Right. You find that, you know, the live work ordinance is kind of a step beyond our home occupation ordinance. The city has an existing home occupation ordinance that allows people to run an office out of their home, but it restricts them from, say, putting a sign on their lawn because as part of the home occupation ordinance, they're still required to maintain the property's residential characteristics. Properties that face primary arterial streets, say like Avenue L or 20th Street West, there are some opportunities to, allow them to have some signage because of the location of where the properties are located. So that's why we've considered, allowing property owners that are located in such a manner to be able to do a live-work type of a situation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Should we move on to public business from the floor? Do we have any speaker cards?
Hi, very briefly, if I may.
Sure.
Just to give you an update on where we are at with the TOD overlay zone. We did get authorization. We have completed the contract process with that consultant, so we will be beginning that outreach effort very shortly for the areas to the southwest, southeast, and northeast of the Metrolink station. We've actually been fortunate because we're going to be able to do code development on all three of those quadrants, whereas before we were only looking at two. But the price came in adequate to do all three. So the Southeast Transit area that we did last year as a vision plan will also get included in actually formulating the regulations. So I think that'll be a great step forward for those business and property owners. Chris Ani, who is sitting in the audience, is the assistant planner who will be the project manager for this. So you will see his smiling face more and more as we work through this process. And as we did with the Southeast Transit Village Overlay Vision Plan, or the Vision Plan process, the ADC is going to be involved in this as we move forward. So you'll begin to get a little bit more information on what your role will be and meetings that we'll have coming up and how we're going to get outreach into the community. So just wanted to give you a little bit of update on that.
Great. That's an exciting plan. Okay, so public business from the floor?
I have no speakers cards.
Okay. Non-agendized items. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the Commission on any subject regarding city business. Under state legislation, no action can be taken on non-agenda items. Members of the public should be aware of this when addressing the Commission regarding items not specifically referenced on the agenda. Please complete a speaker card for the recording secretary. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each.
Also no cards for that.
Okay. So should we move to adjourn the meeting to Thursday, March 7th at 5 p.m.?
I second that.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.